And I welcome back onto the stage our previous speakers from this session. And then we'd like to do a Q&A session now. So floating around the auditorium should be our lovely MCG team who will have roving mics. So if you have any questions, please do put up your hand and someone will come over to you. Off they go. And if I can just ask you, if you ask a question as well, if you can just introduce yourself and say your name and the organisation that you come from, that would be fantastic. And then I'll also be looking on here for any online questions. But I see that we've got someone really, really keen over there. It'd be fantastic. Have you got your mic?
Hello. Hello. Thanks for all the presentations and the presenters. My name is Marjorie. I'm an associate professor in ethical AI. And I have two questions. Is it okay if I'm not here and ask two questions, or do you want me to stick with one?
If we just go for the first question first, and then
okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask to Lou, and I was very interested in one of your points. So your framework of advice of what should be done. Caution to curiosity. So could you expand a bit more on what does that mean, and how do you see the role of digital in that specific aspect? Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, is it, if you...
Hello? Yes. There we go. Wonderful. Can't use mic. Yeah, really, really great question. So the role of going from caution to curiosity, what we found was when we did the research, a lot of the barriers that were in place for people to experiment were because they had this culture of not having access to the data to be curious about, and B, there was, I think Ash really said it very nicely in that failure, like when you have that sequence of like, no, 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 and there's barriers, then you aren't in a place to be kind of like what could be made different. So I'd say it's a thing of not being able to have the tools, the time, the data to be curious about. What we saw also, and it kind of goes into a bit more detail, was curiosity and experimentation safely, because you need to have the right governance structures to not just like every team, every individual just go absolutely wild. You need the kind of process, the structures in place, and I think there was some things around people didn't know what they could play around with and what they couldn't. So a kind of a line that we say is like, when you're in the dark, you tread really carefully. So data lets us turn the light on, we can move around, we can be experimental, but we've got the guide, like the guidebook, whatever I'm trying to say, to try and do that really safely. So that there's a balance to be made there. Thanks. Thanks for your question.
Super. And I've got a question from Slido. So any of the online audiences who are watching as well can also ask questions, and appear to me here too. So, and this one's for Alison. And it says that, did you find that AI/SEO picked up your content in accordions? We've been using them, but I found people are prioritizing content from other websites for their accessibility info.
From what I can tell, yes, it did.
Simple question, simple answer. That's what I like. Quite nice and direct. So also, kind of going back to some of the stuff that Ash mentioned as well, which I said kind of give me cold shivers a little bit about things. But I was wondering for each of our speakers, if they can just talk a bit about how do they find that they learn from any of the failures. I mean, let's face it, we all do experience it a little bit. But Graeme, can I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we are really keen on doing as a science museum is being quite experimental and actually doing some trials, lots of testing, and you know, trying stuff out, seeing if it works, maybe trying a couple of things, having set periods that we're testing different potential results, and actually trying to use data to drive that, and you know, take a very experimental approach to stuff.
And Steph, how do you, from a kind of agency point of view, that?
Yeah, well, interestingly, Ash worked at Substrakt. He was our MD for many years, I think 4 or 5 years in total. So I suppose that's kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier about, from an agency perspective, there is a certain comfort with failure that does need to be within the kind of working culture, because the very sort of nature of what it is that we're doing is we are constantly trying things and testing things and designing things. And if you look at a diagram of a product, life cycle, it's always a circle because it's kind of potentially never-ending, that kind of continuous improvement. You're putting something out there in the wild, real people are using it, you're testing it, you're refining it, you're then working on it again and re-releasing it. And that is just it is just the nature of the beast. And I think what Ash's talk was really, really interesting, and something that he always used to say when he worked at Substrakt is, don't make perfect the enemy of good. This idea that everything absolutely has to be in place, everything has to be perfect before something can be launched is just not realistic. And you do kind of need to take risk and be open to failure and not have that shame of talking about it afterwards and just denying it and moving on, because all of that really good learning is in the failure. So yeah, I guess in an agency it's a little different, but we totally recognise that is quite a unique culture to have at work. And when we're working with clients who, as I say, don't have the luxury of being able to fail because of whatever practicalities they're facing, timelines, budgets, what have you, that is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone has these things that nothing ever goes, can't all pretend that everything's always perfect with things. But I was just aware also we had your second question as well. Did you want to answer? Oh, well, sorry, I can't see it at the end of the lights.
It's for Josephine. Just a very simple question. What was the ticketing supplier you went with after you did your review?
Yes, Expian.
Thank you.
Nice. Any other questions? Any other kind of hands? Yes, please do.
Right, so now I want to ask to the Science Museum. So I was very curious just to understand your approach to group bookings. So my background is in data, and I wanted to know if you had any queries related to how we are going to share the data you collected in this new format of registration across the different parties of the group, and if you used the data for any kind of advertisement that was informed to the group, because I guess you have a different relationship if you have a lead who is registering and then you have other people listed. So I was curious on that specific area. Thank you.
Thanks. So it's no different to our standard ticketing terms and conditions around data sharing and stuff like that. We don't share any data externally. We do have all the data that we gather through ticketing is used across the group, so we don't have any silos. So if you are working at the Railway Museum, you can understand the data at any of the other sites, and actually that's really useful in terms of being able to compare how the different sites work. But we don't really do any external sharing of that group booking data. It's all used internally and covered off in our terms and conditions.
Cool. Right, well, I'd just like to say I'm going to bring the session to a close now. So I'd just like to thank our lovely speakers for this session. So thank you to Lou, thank you to Stephanie, to Graham, Alison, Ash, who did his remotely, and Josephine is also remotely. So I'd like to say thank you very much for your talks. It's really interesting. Thank you.